Yeah, thanks so much, Steve, for the opportunity. Yeah, Bill McGibbon is the world's most famous environmentalist. He's the leader of the climate movement. He wrote the first book on the climate crisis for a general audience called The End of Nature. He's written a dozen more. Foreign Policy magazine called him tops among the global thinkers. The event is Sunday, September the 15th. Tickets start at $45, and the mayor will be doing a Q&A with Bill. Laura Cottingham helped. She made that recommendation to his office, and a lot of city council members. Invitations just went out to them to be there. Members, some of the team members who are working on the plan have already accepted. Should be 300 to 500 people there, so I hope you can make it. Thanks, Steve.
You bet. Thanks, Ryan. All right. Well, I guess let's go ahead and get started without further ado. Marina is with HARC, and she actually worked with the city a few years back, and she and I have conspired before. This is PACE in Houston, the sequel. So the idea here was let's see what's new and different, if anything, or how much things have been improving since the last one that Marina put together. And she puts together an excellent panel. So that thrilled that Sean and Rachel are here. Still waiting on Tim, still in traffic. And without further ado, take it away, Marina.
Great, thanks, Steve, and thank all of you for coming out. And yeah, Tim is swimming over here as we speak, so he may be popping up and joining us. Given, I think, the crowd and the layout, we might shake it up a little bit and make this a little bit less formal than have done previously. And Steve, I prefer collaborate to conspire. Oh, okay. So much more fun to do it that way. But yeah, as Steve mentioned, I'm a research scientist over at HARC. I also serve as a program advisor to Texas PACE Authority, which administers the PACE program here in the city of Houston and the ETJ. And so with that, I'll go ahead, and we've got some great esteemed panelists with us. Thank you for joining us, Tim. Perfect timing. It's a time zone thing, but that's okay. No, and you're not even wet after all that swimming, so that's fantastic. So to my far right, we have Sean Ribble joining us, who is a director over at Greenworks Lending, which is one of the PACE capital providers that works in the market here. And then in the middle, we have Tim Crockett. He is the president of PACE Houston and is basically the project manager, efficiency extraordinaire / real estate guru for all things related to energy efficiency in Houston. And then to my near right is Rachel Davis. Rachel Davis is a senior vice president over at Petros, which is another one of the folks who help to lend money so people can do all of the great energy efficiency, water conservation, and distributed generation upgrades here in the market. So just a quick overview, as Steve mentioned, Texas has had a PACE program live since legislation passed in 2013. The program's been live since 2015. And as you can see by the numbers, we're doing all right with a little over $85 million invested in 23 projects, and nearly 1,000 jobs have been created as a result of the program. So definitely there's a lot of alignment with the work that both USGBC and the city are doing. And so we're pleased that they have partnered to put on this series of monthly chats and to be invited here to be a part of it. So drilling it down a little bit closer, and some of what we're going to talk about today in a little bit more detail are the projects here in Houston. So to date, there have been 4 projects that have been completed with a little over $25 million in investment, again, related specifically to energy efficiency, water conservation, and distributed generation. Got a good jobs growth number there with about 350 attributed to this. And then, of course, the water savings, the energy savings, natural gas saved, as well as the CO2 reduction. So with that, I think what we'll do is maybe have an informal conversation. I have some questions that are prepared, but I think given the room and the group layout here, why don't we turn this into a group conversation? And we can all chat about this, as much as we would like to. So with that, I think, we'll start off with Tim. Could you just give us a quick overview on what PACE is?
Sure. Can everyone hear me? Okay. Before I say that, quick show of hands, how many were at this event last time we did this? Anybody? Everybody? Okay. So PACE, in a nutshell, is a new type of lending. It's been around a little over 10 years. It basically provides 100% long-term fixed rate financing to property owners to incentivize them to do energy, water efficiency improvements to commercial real estate. PACE exists in 34 states. It's a little different in every state. We'll primarily be talking about Texas, I think, today. Texas, it's commercial. And the PACE lender has a security interest in the property that's basically a self-imposed like tax lien on your own property, kind of like a one building TIF or TERS. And it is designed by Texas law so that the dollars in energy saved over the life of the improvements are sufficient to pay for the purchase, installation, and financing of those improvements. So basically, it's kind of a self-liquidating loan, so to speak, so that if I'm putting in an air conditioning system or LED lights or solar or whatever the improvements are, those dollars of energy saved or energy generated are sufficient to basically cover the debt on the building. And that's kind of it in a nutshell. There's more details we can get into in a minute.
Yeah, and I think with that, Rachel, maybe you can get into a little bit more of the details of the types of properties that can leverage PACE and the types of projects that you're seeing at a high level that are using this.
So types of properties, goodness, that's a long list. So it's almost easier to say what doesn't qualify. So obviously residential would not qualify. And then anything that is not privately owned. So if it's a government-owned building, institution, higher education, whatever that might be, that would not qualify for commercial PACE. In terms of types of projects, it's really robust too. And so the way that we like to think about it is there is no set list of what qualifies. Really what you're trying to do at the end of the day is reduce your energy consumption or demand or generate on site. So really, and then same thing on the water side too. But if it meets those qualifications, you're probably going to be able to get it qualified for the program. And so what we see a lot of is HVAC, lighting, building controls. Those are kind of your standard retrofit projects that we'll see plumbing fixtures, high efficiency or high flow, low flow plumbing fixtures. Those we'll see in a lot of retrofit projects. And then as we get into some of the gut rehab type projects where maybe they're taking an existing building and bringing it down to the shell, maybe it's the envelope improvement. So it could be doors, it could be roofing, wall, windows, and then obviously all of the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems that would go into the building. So it's extremely robust. Solar is obviously something as well, resiliency measures qualify as well. So.
Can you go over again? You said residential does not qualify. I see on the second one it says family units.
Multifamily, yes. If it's over 5 units, that would qualify, but a single family residential home, or if it's less than 5 units, it would not qualify. And so there are, I think, 3, now 4 states that do have residential PACE that's adopted, but Texas is commercial only.
Okay, and you said residential and private are not qualified. Is that
correct? No, public entities do not qualify. Private entities do. Yes.
Government
Right.
buildings, municipal buildings.
Yeah, which is unfortunately because those could be really great candidates for the use of PACE, but unfortunately they just don't qualify.
But to that, the State Energy Conservation Office, or SECO, has a Lone Star program, which is kind of similar to PACE, but that is specifically for public buildings. And yes, we have a question over here.
Yes, so not-for-profit
facilities would qualify?
They sure do,
It
yes.
would be just as, same as commercial?
Absolutely.
First project in Texas was not part.
Okay.
Steve?
So have you guys seen any solar yet? Texas, any solar?
I have not seen any solar on our projects. I will pass the baton if you guys have. As you know, so solar in Texas is a little bit tough depending on where
Sure.
you're located.
Yeah.
So it's the economics of that just don't pencil out quite as well as, you know, if you're in California or somewhere up in the Northeast where power prices are a lot higher. So we certainly, there's a ton of interest, and we're trying to find ways to make those work. So if they can be pulled in with a more robust project potentially, then kind of the arbitrage, right, with savings on other measures that may have a higher impact could, you know, make those projects pencil out a little bit better.
Right, but like you were saying, I mean, clearly PACE could finance that, and so I guess if you start with your laundry list of the largest ROIs, and as you go down to where you like don't want to finance anymore, and then maybe, I guess solar is kind of down there for most people deciding, is that kind of what the story is?
Yeah. That's
I'll let you
exactly
guys
what
weigh in, but yes, kind of. That one just tends to be the harder measure to get funded in Texas.
Yeah,
I mean, you guys aren't saying, you aren't kind of.
No, we don't steer away from it, but it is
Absolutely.
one of those that gets looped in typically with the full envelope rehab. We see straight line just solar, but to your point and to Rachel's point, the returns are not as aggressive as if you do LED front loaded and then windows, but when you kind of wrap that together, it justifies the full envelope rehabilitation. So that's kind of where we've seen it dovetail in with traditional upgrades.
And by
To-
returns, you're not talking about lender returns, you're talking
No.
about the property owner's decision is that they'll look at it and kind of go, it doesn't really make.
Yeah.
I mean,
The
it's
return
not
on your
our experience,
investment.
but we're still talking to, you know, people we're trying to do it.
And to that note, there-
They were more difficult in Texas because the electrical rates were lower. Did I get that
Correct.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
However, there are a number of 4 projects in Texas that have used solar from a small general store in Bastrop County, which decided to put solar on its roof because it did have some issues with interruption and wanted to ensure assurances that as a general store in, you know, a smaller town, that it was able to stay up and running. In Austin, there is a family elder care building, which again wanted solar for resiliency. They wanted an uninterrupted power supply to ensure that they were able to continue to be able to serve the elderly population that they do. In Houston, there is a small hotel that actually has leveraged solar in both the elder care facility as well as the hotel in Houston. Those were single measures. So they did solar without adding anything else to the project. So it can be done, definitely, if there is an owner who is motivated. PACE can be a financing mechanism for them to be able to achieve that end.
So, I'm sorry.
Please. It's a conversation.
I'm unclear on this. I'm new to this, but it seems to me like somebody is installing energy upgrades of some sort to save money. And the way that reads is, or the way I understand it is, they then pay back the cost of the upgrades through the savings they make. So basically, they take all their savings and hand it over to you. Not you personally, obviously, but
Sure.
you know, they hand it over to the bank, and so what's in it for them?
I mean, so basically the way the program works, so we're incentivizing them to offset our cost of capital, right? So basically, the utilities cost savings, we call it the savings to investment ratio. But the savings that they experience from the reduction in the utilities costs reduces that operating expense for that building. It isn't like they're handing over directly the funds that they're saving, but basically the goal of the program is to essentially offset our cost of capital. So you're still paying annual increase in the tax
Use
assessment.
the word our, it's not your building, right?
No. The cost of capital in terms of our financing.
In terms of what the bank is financing.
Yeah, so the money that we're providing you for these upgrades, the utilities savings that you're experiencing should offset the loan that we are providing you for principal and interest on an annual basis. Does
It's
that
not
make
like a
sense?
performance contract
Correct.
in that sense,
Yeah.
right? It's just saying that you're contracting with us. Okay, got it.
And the goal in this is for the owner to be cash flow positive, so that actually you are saving more money than you have invested in the upgrades.
Okay, so the way it works is they do upgrades, you check to make sure that they're going to save more than they actually owe on the mortgage or flow.
Correct.
And
Yeah, we
maybe
have certified
maybe
MEP.
they accept, maybe they don't.
We have certified MEP engineers that come out and basically ensure that the utility savings from the upgrades that you're making, the projected savings are going to offset the cost of our loan on an annual basis,
Okay.
so that you are net cash flow positive, or you have a greater than 1-to-1 savings to investment ratio.
Right, okay.
It's actually kind of a dual certification process in Texas, whereby, I know this is kind of weird. You guys can hear us, but I think this is just for the recording. And so there's a dual process. So you'll work, if you're a building owner, you're gonna work with a contractor to scope out your project, and they're gonna tell you what they expect to save. You will then take that to your lender, and they'll start working up your financing, and then you will also bring in what they call an independent third-party reviewer. And so they are a certified engineer. They will review the work that's been put together, the scope, the anticipated savings, and they will put their stamp on that, saying, not guaranteeing your savings, but saying that what was lined out to you by your contractor is within the realm of what you should see on this project. And then that is one of the qualifications required for the project by the administration as well. So gives you an extra layer of comfort that what you're seeing from the contractors for the building owners, that's just one additional layer.
And can you confirm it's for rehabilitation of apartments? It could not be used on a new apartment construction, is that correct?
It's only if it's a tear down rebuild or like a gut rehab would it work. It has to be a previously developed lot that you are improving by using PACE to do your new construction. Brownfield new construction, I guess you could call it, or gray build. Does that make sense? Okay.
So does the project need to be over a certain size? Are small businesses interested in the program?
You'll see, it really depends on, I don't think there's a threshold for the program.
There's not a threshold for the
Yeah,
program.
So it's really gonna be based on kind of, I guess you could say, what maybe the lender's minimum threshold would be. Ours tends to be kind of that $500,000 range, but there's a list of capital providers that will fund into the Texas market. And so, you can speak for you guys, but everyone has kind of a different threshold. But we've seen projects, $100,000.
We've seen
all the
them
way up
lower.
to-
We've seen them like 70s.
all the way up to
70,000.
20 million plus. So there's a very wide range.
And to Rachel's point, there's about 24 capital providers that work in the Texas space, in addition to, community banks and other lending institutions that can play in the program. So really the availability for pots of money to lend, there is, as Rachel said, there's no basement to it. Really, it's whatever's going to pencil out and make economic sense for the project.
Yeah, you raised a good question. So there's kind of two sets of rules to keep in mind. There's the Texas PACE law that says you have to do this, 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 and you cannot do this, this, this. Then there's kind of what's practical in the work of the people involved. And that varies by lender. Some lenders are looking for smaller deals and higher volume, and some are looking for bigger transactions. So there's some rules, like there's not a minimum, but it probably doesn't make economic sense for a property owner to go do, a $15,000 lighting upgrade to a building and go through all of the work to do a PACE project. It's probably easy just to write a check for that, or maybe just borrow short-term money or something if it's really small and a fast payback and it's just easy to do. PACE law does not require a multi-improvement scope. Marina mentioned there are some single measure improvements, energy conservation improvements, just solar or just a chiller replacement. We find that a lot of times, once a property owner starts looking into it, maybe it was driven by my chiller is failing, I have to buy a new chiller, so they think I'm just going to do a chiller, and they get into it and they go, well, if I add controls to this, it's better, and maybe it's time to do an LED lighting retrofit, and I add that to it. And every project that you add to it, obviously it makes it bigger, but from a property owner standpoint, those improvements, each of them are lowering the cost of operation by more than they cost to do. So the chiller, the cooling tower, the lights, the controls, the window, whatever all of the improvements are, each one that you can bring to the table that will lower the operating costs of the building, that accrues to the benefit of the property owner, because lower operating costs means more NOI means higher property value. And so those kind of projects, once a property owner gets involved, they might have started just saying, I just got to replace a chiller, that's all I want to do. But when they start digging into it, it makes sense. It's not that the lenders or a facilitator, somebody says you need to do this, but it kind of makes sense as you kind of get into a project. And so it's funny that a lot of projects will start out, I'm just going to, do this one thing, usually driven by, an emergency. I've got to replace something. But it's frequently the case. And there's probably some contractors in the room, might be a mechanical contractor, a solar contractor, a LED contractor, that we really encourage everybody to kind of work together, because it's in everybody's best long-term interest, especially our clients, the property owner, to do what's best long-term for the property. So if you can bring multiple measures to the table, and that makes PACE a little easier to justify when you've got bigger dollars and more energy savings kind of on the table to do things.
Where does your money come from that you lend?
So we're backed by institutional investment. So we have, TIAA or teachers, as well as Carval or Cargill backs us. And so basically we underwrite, approve, pay for all of our loans in-house. But to his point, the beauty of the program is you're incentivizing property owners to be proactive as opposed to reactive, as opposed to addressing concerns and kicking the can down the road as they come. Being able to rehabilitate the full envelope of the building and be net cash flow positive when you're doing it, it's a public good in that we're rehabilitating the entire envelope of buildings, but it's also beneficial to the property owner so that you're not addressing the same concerns, same issues on an annual basis, and being able to kind of address it with a single solution.
Yeah, and just to expand upon that really quick, it also helps them take a longer term view of what they're doing with the project, because we see a lot of people that, in commercial office, for instance, they don't know if they're going to own this building for 2 years or 20 years, right? When the price is right, that building could be for sale. And so a lot of times if they can't get paid back to implement those measures, I'm probably preaching to the choir here, right? They're probably going to put that off as long as they can, because they're never going to get their money back on that. Well, with PACE, because it is done as a property tax assessment, it's going to remain with that property, and it's going to transfer seamlessly to the next owner. So the current owner of the property has the assurance that they can go ahead and make the investment, do the PACE assessment to get the project implemented. They're going to see the savings, but then that repayment obligation as well as the ongoing savings will automatically transfer to the new owner. So it really lets them take a long-term view, get the building upgraded for their tenants, and it's just kind of a win-win all the way around. And then same thing on the capital side, right? We're backed by institutional investors. Just the same. There's no shortage of folks that want to hold the paper for the PACE transactions. They're just it's a budding environment, right? Investors want to be they want to have safe, secure investments, and the fact that it's also supporting renewable generation and efficiency in the environment is just another really great feature of it.
So the assessment that is tied to the building, does that show up on, where does it get mailed from? Who does it come from? Does it come from the city, the bank, PACE?
It's a really good question. Texas actually ends up being a direct bill state, so the lenders will bill directly to the borrowers. And so really it's only going to show up, you'll get a bill from the county if you're delinquent, but aside from that, we'll bill direct. In different states, it's handled differently. Sometimes the county will collect and then remit it back to the lenders, but it's just direct collect in Texas. It makes it a lot easier on the local governments that they don't have to add that as another process for them.
Okay, this might kind of lead going off that, and I've been going down the rabbit hole a little bit. Could the scenario arise where a new, someone who buys a building who has the PACE assessment tied to it could one day be in the building, show up and say, what is the bill for? And, or is that part of a disclosure in the sale, a required disclosure?
I would assume that that is definitely something that they would want to disclose during the due diligence process of purchasing that building, absolutely. Just as they would, you know, what the property taxes are. It's gonna show up as a lien when they pull a title search. Exactly, yep,
Quality title will show it.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So they will be fully disclosed at the time of acquisition of the property.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like with the property taxes or a water sewer assessment or anything like that.
And to Rachel's note, while it is direct bill from the capital provider, the local government as well will send a notice. It's not a bill, but it's just a notice. There's a reminder to folks that, yes, you know, you do have this, and yes, this has been authorized by the local government. The program has been. Oh, let's get the gentleman behind you for a minute, and then we'll come back.
Compare and contrast PACE with Fannie Mae Green Loan. It's that product.
I don't know the specifics of the Fannie and Freddie, so I probably wouldn't be the best person to kind of weigh in on how that works with their program. I know that it's somewhat similar. So we have lenders or borrowers that we'll work with that'll choose to go that path versus PACE. So, but I don't want to speak out of turn there, sorry.
Is it non-recourse and is it tied to the property taxes in the same way, or is it tied to the lender where you're gonna have to cover that with the sale of property, like a traditional loan? Does it vary in any?
I do not know the answer to that.
I don't know the
Yeah.
logistics of anything.
I'm gonna guess that it is not
Yeah.
tied to the property as an assessment. That would be news to me if it was, but in terms of if it's recourse or non-recourse, I don't know that.
Was your question about the PACE loan or the Fannie Mae loan?
PACE loan I'm familiar with, but we're
Yeah.
seeing more and more people put it in the Fannie Mae Green Loan bucket, and we're trying to
Yeah.
distinguish more than the advantages on the PACE side versus
Yeah.
Fannie Mae. So far, all I've seen, as far as solar is concerned, is Fannie Mae's gonna make specific recommendations on system size, whereas PACE would be at the discretion of the developer.
That's correct.
That's all I've seen so far. I didn't know if there's any other mention.
That's something that we can definitely look into, though. I saw another hand, yes.
Is this mostly for owners to go and find their contractors, or is this typically something contractors bring to owners as a service?
Yes?
Yes, no?
Yeah. Good answer, yes. It's funny, with,
Whoops.
you know, any contractor has probably had a conversation with the property owner who, hey, here's a chiller or a cooling tower or light, and the property owner goes, great idea, my 2020 budget's already fully allocated, interested, but call me back in a year. Well, the contractor could pull this out of the pocket and say, what if I could bring 100% financing to you and you didn't have to pull it out of your CapEx budget? Would you like to move forward and look at that? And yeah, that's a neat idea. Because we've all sat around the table, you know, this time of year, you're looking at the next budget, and for whatever reason, you've got, you know, $1 million available for CapEx improvements in your property, and the engineer wants, you know, a new motor or pump or something in the engine room, and the marketing person wants, you know, a new marble lobby, and we're not doing half a chiller and we're not doing half the lobby, and you kind of have that argument every year to do that. Well, if you can pull out the energy efficiency improvements and finance them with PACE, that $1 million is still available for the building to do non-energy efficiency improvements or not spend the money at all and utilize PACE. So great tool for contractors as they're going to, you know, sell their products to property owners that, hey, there's a 100% financing option out there. If you're interested, we could talk about it. So.
Can you talk about banking institutions that are favorable to PACE as far as having to take the second lead position?
Yeah, on our website, pacehouston.com, and on Texas Space Authority's website, and on some others, you know, we've got a list of, I don't know, 300 banks that have agreed to do a PACE loan. Now, the challenge is just because, you know, Bob in New York agreed to a PACE loan in New York doesn't mean that Susie with that same bank in Houston automatically knows about it and whatnot. Because, but there are virtually every bank you can think of, big and regional and small, that have done one or several PACE loans. But it's not typically a bank policy that, you know, all PACE loans are automatically, you know, agreed to. But, you know, there's, I don't know what the current, it changes every day, but, you know, 300 and something odd lenders, first mortgage lenders, who have You know, so that's a good, let's dig into that for just a second. So the conversation almost always happens like this. The first time a first mortgage holder is approached by, hey, I know you've got a $50 million loan on our building, but we've got a great idea. We want to put a $10 million PACE loan ahead of you in the capital stack. And the answer is always, I would never, you know, agree to that. And you think, well, why would you agree to that? Why would a PACE loan, why would a first mortgage holder agree to a PACE loan being ahead of them in the capital stack? And there's I think at least 3 good reasons why they would do that. One, they already have a first loan lien on the building, and so the new chiller is going to be attached to the building, and so they have a lien on that improved asset. Second, because by PACE law in Texas, the energy saved is going to be more than the cost of the additional debt, the property owner is in a better financial position to pay the first mortgage back because their cash flow is better because you've reduced electric expense, you know, $1, and you've, you know, added the PACE assessment that's maybe 90 cents. And so there's a net gain to the property in terms of cash flow. And so that makes their borrower in a better financial position. The kind of unique thing about PACE, the third reason, is that a PACE loan cannot be accelerated even in default. So if I don't pay my my mortgage payment and I'm late, the mortgage company can file a foreclosure notice on me that my entire loan is due to get out from under this trouble. And I can say, well, I can get caught up. They go, you know, we've had it. We just want the entire loan, and they foreclose. With PACE, all that you have to pay is what's due. You just have to get current because it's a tax assessment. If a tax foreclosure happens, they never come and say, well, we also want next year's payment and next year's payment and 20 years from now payment. You just have to get current to get that foreclosure umbrella off of your head, right? So a first mortgage holder frequently, if they will, you know, listen to the rational argument that the property is going to be a better quality property that you already have a lien on, your borrower is going to be in a better financial condition for your own loan and themselves. And third, you're not behind the entire loan that you'd have to, you know, pay to remedy. You know, a $1 million loan at like 6% over 20 years is like 50 grand a year. And so you're behind maybe 50,000, or if they let it slide a year, maybe 100,000 if you're 2 years behind, not $1 million behind. And so that's a big difference for a mortgage holder to go, the building's got new chillers and new lights and all this stuff. It's a great improved asset, and I'm only really behind 1 year's payment if I have to step in and clean that up so I don't get, you know, behind it. So those are reasons why 300 and some odd banks that have a first position have agreed to a PACE loan to come in and be ahead of them in the capital stack. So
that leads to one question. I'm sorry, I won't take everybody's time. But if that's the case, why not allow a mortgage on a property to bump to the 30% PACE threshold rather than a 20% PACE threshold? In effect, contributing to the value of that property while it's under mortgage, as you mentioned. You know, I don't know if you went over the current rules with everyone, but if you have a mortgage on your property, you can borrow up to 20% of its value with a PACE loan. If you don't have a mortgage, you can borrow 30% of the property's value with a PACE loan, correct? It seems like you would almost make that reverse, or you would allow just 30% to be the threshold, regardless of whether there's a mortgage on the property or not.
In Texas, the best practice guidance is 20% with or without a mortgage. There is a process for the loan to value to do, oh my gosh, I just lost the word, an override. To be able to, override the loan to value assessment on that. But 20% is that rule of thumb. I have seen 30% as a rule of thumb in other markets. And again, it usually depends on, you know, the conversation and what the improvements are, what the building is. So there is a story that can be told to allow you to have that justification to go over the 20%.
Okay, so if they were getting a roof in this process or something that's really going to add value to the building, it's critical, pushing past the 10% maybe.
Right, and then in that case, you can use the assessed value versus the appraised value. And I don't know if you guys wanted to talk about that a little bit.
So just another comment on that. So, PACE lenders are highly secured, right? They're tax lien position ahead of the first, very, very secure. Those guidelines are put in place to make sure that the first mortgage holder is protected, and that keeps that equity in there. Because we're in Houston in the mid 80s, you had a building that's worth, $10 million, and then, tomorrow it's worth $5 million. It's doesn't happen often, but you really want to maintain that equity position of at least 20% in there. The PACE lender that is secure, I'm losing my train of thought here. The PACE lender is secure in their position. It's important for all of us that everybody that's at the table is also protected. There are some states, I think Florida's this way still, you don't have to go get first mortgage holder approval to do a PACE loan. Your first mortgage holder will read about it in the newspaper that you got a PACE loan that is ahead of them in the capital stack. When Texas created PACE, they looked around the country at different states that had already done PACE and said, we like what they did here, but not there. We like what they did here, but not there, and picked and chose what I think is the best PACE program in the country. And they said, look, this is really in the first mortgage holder's best interest, and we're going to step on some toes and hurt some feelings if we just allow people to go do this without bringing the first mortgage holder to the table. And so let's bring the first mortgage holder to the table and allow them to understand what's going on and actually require that they sign off on this. And so that way it's a healthier long-term environment. And so the first mortgage holder might say, man, this is great. Yeah, I'd be fine if you got, a higher loan. And with that kind of stuff, it probably would influence, you guys to kind of look at it and maybe make some judgment calls. But the reason is really, it's not necessarily about the PACE lender or the PACE contractor or the property owner. It's really to protect, the bigger financial market of the first mortgage holders who, were involved in crafting this state legislation so that it's healthy and long-term.
And to that point, Sean, I know you guys recently closed a project where instead of using the appraised value, you ended up, instead of using the assessed value, you ended up using the appraisal for that 20% and got that justification. Do you want to talk through that process a little bit?
Absolutely. We try to go through path of least resistance with regard to valuation. Our goal is to limit costs on the side of due diligence, but in the event where, the assessed value doesn't justify the borrowings, we'll get an appraisal, and which allows us to lend 20% based on the as stabilized value of that asset. So to kind of push up that benchmark and allow you access to the capital you need to get the project done. I do want to highlight kind of the relationship with first mortgage providers. It's prudent underwriting and good for due diligence for us to align ourselves with how they analyze and treat debt. We don't want to circumvent how a bank treats it, and we're happy to have those conversations with your banker. That's our job, is to generate education and address potential questions, highlight the fact that it cannot accelerate and that we're not going to, quote unquote, prime the first mortgage, which is kind of a popular term, and that our note would increase because of default interest or something to that effect, where you go from 80% and all of a sudden you're at 100% because of default interest or something like that. And so we want to dispel that and have those conversations. But we also align our underwriting. We don't want to go below a 1.25 debt service coverage ratio of our loans, because we're not putting you in a good position, and we want to make sure that this is a sound investment for you, but also a safe investment for the bank, and we're not going to impair their first mortgage.
Jim, you had a question?
Yeah, I got here late, so I apologize if you covered this earlier. It sounds like it's okay for churches and other sort of facilities as long as there's something you can put a lien against, as long as they own it.
Yeah, as long as there is real estate collateral that basically we were able to put the assessment on. So if it's a greenfield, vacant lot, or something to that effect, it wouldn't qualify, but improved properties with real estate qualify.
Thank you.
Located in a PACE active district. So the state passes, in Texas, PACE enabling legislation for the entire state. Then it's up to the individual local municipalities, usually counties, in some case cities, like it is in Houston, to vote to opt in and participate in the state's program. So, all of Fort Bend County, Houston's in, Harris County's in the process of looking, but like Montgomery County's not in. But when Houston passed it, it was for the city limits of Houston and their ETJ. Their extraterritorial jurisdiction is basically most of the unincorporated areas of Harris County, but it bleeds a little bit into the counties around us. And so there's actually a little part of Montgomery County that is in Houston's ETJ that is part of the Houston deal, and so the Houston PACE program. And so you have to find out if the specific address of the property that you're proposing to do the PACE improvement on, the loan on, is actually in a PACE district. So that's just an important.
Thanks for that clarification. So places like Bel Air, Westview, Memorial Villages, it'd be worth checking.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, Harris
But the
County.
Harris County umbrella might not.
Yeah, well, Harris County
Over those.
would, but I don't think the Harris County umbrella is actually fully in place yet. There was a vote and then, some questions that wasn't quite finalized yet, but yeah,
It's
it's
public
fun.
policy, it takes time.
Yeah, right. And so, in Harris County, and I've lived here all my life, and you think, well, how many cities are in Harris County? 8, 10, what? It's like 30 something cities are in Harris County. And so, yeah, Bel Air and Piney Point and West University and Southside and Pasadena and Galena Park are not fully covered yet. And so, even though they're in Harris County, and we all kind of think of Houston as you drive from Pasadena through Houston, through Bel Air to Katy. So, yeah.
I think San Antonio is the only major metropolitan area of Texas that does not yet have PACE enacted.
Yeah, I think there's about 30 jurisdictions now, or PACE regions across the state of Texas, and that's cities as well as counties. And you're right, outside of San Antonio, all of the other major areas from Galveston to El Paso and Amarillo down to the Valley are covered. But it's growing. I think the biggest hurdle in Texas is just it's so big. There's a lot of counties and a lot of cities, so that means a lot of adoption. Yes.
So PACE Building Efficiency is an administrator?
Yes, we are a for-profit private company. I've had a real estate company here. I've been in business for 40 years and 20 years with my own company. You're not required, property owner's not required to have a facilitator. They can do it themselves. Any lender will be glad to help them through that process. We've, I think, created an opportunity for a property owner to have, somebody on their team that kind of does a lot of the due diligence. And, when we ended up closing the office deal with Rachel and her firm, and we spent months pulling data, and I think 117 documents with kind of a bow on it. You still had to do your due diligence, but it's funny, you ask a property owner for 12 months utility bills, and you get one. And then you say, I need 12, and then they send you 11. And then you ask for 12, and they send you 12, but you got 2 Mays and no April. And then it's those kinds of things. It's not rocket science, but we spent hundreds of hours doing it. And there's, I'm sure, people that could kind of blow through it and maybe cut some corners, but we spent a lot of time just trying to make sure that it was done right, because it's important for all of us that these deals work and are done well, especially as we're getting started, because we don't want deals to start blowing up and have you didn't do the debt coverage ratio really like you should have, and now the property's not worth what it was, and now the first lender's in trouble and not happy about PACE. And so, we're a for-profit company that helps property owners do that.
And to your question about the administrator, so the City of Houston has a private nonprofit, which is Texas PACE Authority, that administers the program on behalf of the city. So basically, Texas PACE Authority ensures that all of the documents that Tim is talking about get pulled together, all of the underwriting documents that Rachel and Sean pull together are appropriate, and that the contracts between the owner, the lender, and the local government are all I's dotted, T's crossed, and to that end. So Texas PACE Authority doesn't really play in this space, but is more like Switzerland and makes sure that everybody's playing nicely and everybody's doing what they need to do according to the rules. Because the guidance that has been put forth by Keeping PACE in Texas, which is basically the advocacy group that got PACE started in Texas and started with the initial standards and program guidelines that the Texas PACE Authority follows as a program administrator. And so through that, it's a uniform process. So whether you're doing a project here in Houston or in El Paso, it's the same process, it's the same timeline, it's virtually the same set of documents.
How many projects have you done in Houston, and what sizes?
We have funded 3 projects now in Houston,
Over what
ranging,
timeline?
I'm sorry,
Over what timeline?
over what, oh goodness, our first one, when did that close, the end of 17?
I should say 3 years.
Yeah, 3 years.
Yeah, I think so, in Houston at least, so probably over the last couple of years, 20,
And to that point, the Houston
Yeah.
program had 2 levels of adoption, so it wasn't really fully baked until a little over 3 years ago.
That's true. So 2 of the projects were a little over $1 million. One was, you know, a commercial office building, the 1225 North Loop project. I think it's on a case study out front. And then one was with Simon Property Groups for the Houston Premium Outlets. And then one is another undisclosed borrower that did another project here not too long ago. So.
And how long from start to finish do those take?
That's a really great question. Every project is different. We can probably as close, well, it depends on who you ask, right? If you ask Tim when he got involved in the 1225 project, it was over a year, right?
Yeah, we
From
worked over a
initiation
year,
to close. But in terms of getting, once you have a signed term sheet and you're moving to actually underwrite a project, it can be as quick as 6 weeks. Or if it's a larger gut rehab type project that's gonna have a senior lender involved in their closing, or they have a mezz lender, or some sort of a TIF contract that they're waiting on to pull in, those can kind of drag out a little bit longer. And so we've seen some of those still close in as fast as 6 weeks, and then some of those can take, you know, multiple months before those are actually teed up and ready to go.
The real question is, how fast can the property owner comply with all their requests for information? And that is usually the logjam. Even though they've got all the documents ready, they.
Other than these 12 months of utility statements, what else do you require?
Yeah, the other thing is, we're typically the ones waiting. Usually we'll go through our due diligence and have approval pending who you identify for the first mortgage provider, them engaging the appraisal and things to that effect. So the time span that Rachel was talking about is typically because we're waiting for the maturation of the actual project, not because CPACE takes an extensive amount of time to put in place. Our underwriting criteria and due diligence are a lot less than what you are going to experience with the first mortgage provider. What we typically look for is probably 2 years operating history for the actual building, information or financial information on the sponsor, and the other due diligence items. For example, you know, we're going to get the utilities breakdown, the proposal for what the upgrades are going to be, and then we'd also want to see the due diligence items like the appraisal, environmental if it's applicable, and then also kind of the engineering analysis.
And how do you establish what that savings is over their current utility bills?
Yeah, so that's why, yeah, it's a great question. That's why we want to know kind of what your proposal is for the upgrades. And then basically we're going to have, upfront, you should be able to get an estimate from the contractors. And so what we'll do is what we call an energy calculator, where we compare directly basically the energy cost savings compared to our cost of capital. And we can do a rough estimate to make sure that it makes sense. Where the actual rubber meets the road and the checks and balances is when we have a term sheet with you, and then we would engage an MEP engineer who's going to come in and say, this is what the true projected energy savings are. But we're going to have a commitment to you before we start incurring third-party expenses.
And if you have a single measure, I'm just switching out a chiller. You know, I've got a 300-ton chiller that's failing. I'm going to put a new 300-ton chiller in. Those are really fast and simple and whatnot. Where you get, and here's a true statement. So a new air conditioning system can save 30% of your power. A new control system can save 30% of your power. A new lighting system could save 30% of your power. You keep going.
So pretty soon,
but
you're selling energy.
Well, now here's the rub. If you do all of those, they all obviously can't do that. The first one will, but then the second one is a percentage of, well, now a partially improved building. And so that gets into some more complicated energy modeling from an engineer to kind of say, well, if we do all of these, how do they interact with each other so that we can project a realistic savings, because you're not going to save 120% of the building's power, obviously. And so that's where things can get a little bit more complicated, but good in a good way, because you're doing a more comprehensive project. But you know, it's really the property owner's time to kind of pull information together, and then lenders are, I mean, they do this all over the country, and both of these companies are pros and have done, you know, bunches and bunches and bunches of deals. So it's usually the property and/or their contractor that's trying to get some information on the equipment that's being put in or something so that numbers can be calculated.
Going back to the previous question on the number of projects in Houston, I'm a bit confused. You said it was 20 plus in Houston, or was it in Texas?
No, we funded, I'm sorry, I should have maybe clarified. I think there are, 4 projects that have been funded in Houston to date. And so we've done 3, Micro and Petros, we've done 3 of those 4 projects. And so I think the number maybe 20 that I threw out was, it's over $20 million
Yeah.
worth of PACE investment in Houston. Sorry, thanks for the clarification there.
You guys done any projects involving skylights?
My recollection.
No.
Is there any sort of, I guess, summary of how you might calculate the savings from introducing daylight during the day when you wouldn't have to turn lights on? I mean, is that easy to do? What's kind of the process there? And I'm a contractor that does skylights, that's fine.
So as the capital provider, we'd probably lean on you and or the engineering group to kind of provide that to us. Because really what we do is we pair off basically the projected savings to the capital. We lean heavily on the engineering and contractor to kind of provide those estimates. And that's why it's important to align yourself with savvy contractors that are going to look for low-hanging fruit and the highest return on the investment in terms of the upgrades that you're going to make. Just like he had talked about, you're not going to do everything and get 30% on each of the items. You're going to look for highest and best use and lowest cost of installation. And we would kind of lean on them to provide us that information in terms of what the energy savings are going to be. I know it's kind of a cop-out answer, but yeah, know your strengths as a lender, and that's definitely not one of them.
Which, really quick, I don't think we asked this question before we got started, but just to figure out kind of maybe the audience and kind of where each of you is coming from, can we maybe
why don't
poll
we?
and see how many are from kind of the contractor services side? Okay, and then I guess property owners, developer side? Okay, who am I missing?
Architects, engineers?
Yep. Okay, so it's a really good diverse group, okay. It just helps kind of put some of that, we can focus some of what we respond accordingly.
Great.
So is the assessment for the life of the project, or is it for 15 years, 20 years? How does that work?
Good question.
So the eligible time is based off of what we call the estimated useful life of the upgrades. So basically, depending upon what you put in, we want to make sure that the term doesn't outlive the upgrades to the property that you're making. So traditionally, what you're going to see is either 20 or 25-year term for the loan. It's fully fixed and fully amortized.
Just curious, when you talk to your lenders, these big funders, are there conversations about climate change 5 years away, 10 years down the road when things might be, say, hotter, or you might be in carbon budgets and things like that?
I don't think that's been brought up in any of my conversations with lenders.
I know that it's certainly a topic, right? I want to say it's New York, that now New York is another market that is in the process of kind of revamping their base market. And actually, I think they can use the carbon when they also have a similar kind of savings to investment ratio requirement. They call it cost benefit ratio analysis. That they will actually let you figure in kind of the cost of the carbon offsets, right, into your savings. So as we see a lot more cities like New York and others that are implementing these climate change policies, this is a great source of capital to enable, the business owners within these cities to actually be able to do it, because otherwise they have these mandates that are kind of, given to them all in good faith, right? This is something that is happening, folks. It's a good thing to do, but this really gives them a way to fund that long-term, low-cost, non-recourse tied to the property so that the benefit continues and they can get the updated property. So it is coming up, not as much as I think we thought we would hear it, but resiliency is starting to be a much broader topic. Measures that are getting pulled in as what would qualify for PACE is changing, whether it's flood prevention or wind resistance. In Florida, that's picking up some steam.
Yeah, so in Florida, you can do hurricane prevention kind of stuff. California, you can do seismic stuff in terms of PACE. Texas right now is kind of energy, water conservation stuff, but, you know.
But some of that energy and water can inherently be resilient, so a lot of that is thinking through how this is working out, because if you are replacing those windows, you're putting hurricane impact windows in, those are inherently going to be more energy efficient than what you currently have within the facility. So there are ways to make that pencil out. And Sean, I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
Oh, no, I was just going to say it varies based off region. I mean, it also is kind of a political climate, right? So in Colorado, they passed Green Roof Initiative, where any gut rehabilitation, you need to either install plants and what have you on top of your roof, or you can utilize solar. And they're publishing energy scores where if you're not at X% over X amount of time, then there are going to be monetary penalties. So there are things that are changing on a national basis, kind of push that referendum, but it varies kind of on a regional basis, kind of as she had alluded to with New York. You kind of see it all over the board, kind of based on political climate and kind of the own city's priorities.
Well done. So on that note, I'm going to get close to wrapping this up a little bit, but so if somebody in here is interested in doing a PACE project, either from the contractor, owner, or design side, where should they start? I'll throw that up to whoever wants to take it.
Yeah, call any of us.
That's a good answer. And it's really true. So what I would just say to that is, it's probably never too early to start, especially if it's your first time to go through a PACE project, to call any one of us. You can reach out to the folks at Texas PACE Authority. They're probably going to send you to their website and say, here's a list of capital providers to reach out to. But anyway, do that, but reach out so that you can kind of bounce things off of us. We can check the address to make sure that it's within a PACE eligible jurisdiction. We can make sure that there aren't any parcel issues or anything else that would be kind of a red flag to guide you. And then that way, you guys are just really prepared, and we can help kind of start that process. But really that's, once you know the scope of what you want to do, as well as, kind of when you want to close, the amount of financing you're going to want, that's probably a good time to make sure that you're talking to somebody to see what your options are and how quickly you could get everything teed up for close. Anything else?
Yeah, I mean, to piggyback off of Rachel, I had to say, there's no set path, right? If you come to us with a baked proposal, that's great. But it's our job to guide you through the process, coordinate approval for lien holder consent, all of those things. So feel free to lean on us. That's our job. It's not just capital providing, it's guiding you through the process, ensuring that it's going to be an eligible project, and kind of getting you to the closing table.
And I'll add one other thing too, for the contractors and service providers in the room too. We are resources for you, so don't feel that there's a lot of nuances to the actual mechanics of PACE and questions that your clients are going to ask. So don't feel that you can't pick up the phone and call us and have us get on a phone call or send some information or even attend a meeting with you, because I am certainly not an expert in the installation of an HVAC system, and so I will, defer to the folks in the room that are when those opportunities come up. So just really see us as your partner and the folks that can kind of help the process, and you will not be stuck in the middle of all of the heavy lifting, right? We will do all of the paper shuffling and getting all of the approvals with the borrower, so you guys can move on to the next project that you have in front of you.
And I think that's the great thing with the capital providers in this market is that you guys really can provide a turnkey solution or as light of a touch as is needed for the project.
Yeah. I was going to just add, here's a nugget, that PACE law in Texas does not allow for a property to be reimbursed for expenses that were already incurred. Like we did a lighting retrofit, last year. Can we get reimbursed for that? Not in Texas. And there's some careful nuances. There's typically some engineering expenses. Maybe there's an appraisal or some things that you might be on the verge of doing. There's the ability in Texas to kind of get started with the paperwork without any real commitment or expense on the property owner's part, but you kind of plant the flag on the calendar that says, my intent is to pursue this PACE project. Don't necessarily have to close it, but you've done that. And it's documented and recorded. And then after that, you engaged an engineer and had to pay him something, or you had to put a down payment on a chiller, or you had to do something where that cash had to go out before the loan closed. That's not being reimbursed, I mean, technically it is, but from a legal standpoint, you're not getting reimbursed. That is an expense during the project because you established the beginning date back here on the calendar, really without any commitment to do it, but you've kind of made that clear, which is a trick that a lot of people kind of get stuck in. Well, I've already hired the engineer, I paid their down payment, I've already bought the chiller, it's on its way and stuff. It's like, no, it's kind of, that ship has sailed.
CO on your, gun rehab, that's probably too.
Yeah,
So yeah, if you're thinking about using it, reach out to one of them, reach out to Texas Pace Authority, so that intent definitely can be established sooner than later. As Tim said, that, intent of reaching out to any of the capital providers or project developer or the Texas Pace Authority doesn't make it, anything binding of what you're gonna do. But it is that good kind of first step to, as you said, plant that flag to ensure that if this is something you do wanna end up pursuing, great. If it's not, then you've sent a couple emails or had a phone call.
So initiation is not commitment.
Correct. Correct. Yeah, I believe you guys also have.
You might want a $500 deposit or something with the initial
That's
application.
for the initial application. There is a pre-application fee, though.
Yeah,
A pre-application form on Texas Pace's website. And if you fill that out, that will establish your intent.
Yeah.
So it's just as simple as, filling out a form.
No commitment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The application fee generally comes in when you're further along in the process and we're starting to really generate documents and asking the Texas Pace Authority to help coordinate with the local governments.
Okay.
That's when by that point, you'll already be under term sheet with your lender as well. And so you'll be on that path before you really have to expend anything on that side.
So are there recurring fees or any fees to participate in the program?
So Texas Pace Authority, as she said, does charge a $500 application fee. So if you're interested in using the program and want to plant that flag in the ground, then do the pre-application. That'll take a few minutes out of your time, sending an email, that's it. As to her point, once you have that term sheet, you are moving down this in order to, ensure that this is a project that's going to move forward. I think all around, you're asked to have a little bit of skin in the game, and so that's what that $500 fee is for. That does go towards building out the entire document set and ensuring everything is done. Moving forward, there is an administrative fee that is charged by Texas Pace Authority, and that is just to do that initial paperwork over the lifetime of the assessment. And that is included in with the soft costs that Tim was talking about that can be wrapped into the entire PACE assessment.
Is there a live map of the areas that are covered?
Yes. Yes, and that is on the Texas Pace Authority website. And then the State Energy Conservation Office, SECO, also has some information about PACE.
And then if you're looking outside of Texas as well, I don't know how many
Oh,
of you guys
Pace
kind
Nation.
of cross borders with your projects, but Pace Nation has their website, has a map that'll show you which states have opted in, and then you can also kind of drill down when it's working. Sometimes
Yeah,
it
it's
doesn't drill
but
down.
it's a great resource.
But at least you can see which states to give you a little bit of an indication. But normally you could check by kind of city, county level, and then it would take you specifically to whether or not there was a program. So
most other states are by the state, and Texas is different jurisdiction.
no, it's still. I think there's only a couple of states that are actually across the state where it's been implemented. Most of them are where it's adopted or it's legislatively passed at the state level, and it has to be locally adopted by the various jurisdictions.
And what did you say, was it Pace Nation?
Pace Nation, yes.
Great.
Yes.
My background's energy efficiency engineering. Who hires the third-party reviewer? Is it the vendors?
That's a great question. So the key there is that it's independent, and so it's the property owner that will do it. But before you do it, talk to your lender and make sure that they are in agreement that you are a viable choice. I can't hire my cousin Bob to be my independent reviewer, and so it's very transparent and above board. So your best path would be get the property owners to say, I want to use you. And then before they sign a contract and pay you, then the property owner should talk to the lender and say, this is who we're talking about doing. And, oh, wait, they're already the engineer working with the mechanical contractor, so we can't use them on this project or something. And especially true if you've got lots of people in your office or other offices that maybe because of a relationship that you might not even be aware of, they're already involved in the project. But you can wear the independent third-party reviewer hat today on this project, and his engineering firm can be the mechanical contractor engineer doing the stuff for the building, and then next week on a different project, maybe you switch hats and you're doing his role and he's doing yours. But start with the property owner, but before you start exchanging money and contracts, just make sure everybody at the table kind of is aware of that decision, to just make sure it's thumbs up and independent. And in Texas, it has to be a licensed professional engineer in the state of Texas, in the area of specialty. So, you don't want a sanitation engineer doing a mechanical review or something. So,
Because the PE does have to sign and stamp the documents for both the first as well as the second review. Okay, any last questions? Yes, sir.
Can this financing be in conjunction with any utility rebates from some of the?
Absolutely.
Yes? Do you guys collaborate as far as sharing the information with the utility providers?
That probably would be initiated by the contractors that are actively involved in it, and then disclosed in the details of the, we're spending $1 million for a chiller that qualifies for, the utility in this particular market's rebate program, C42 or whatever, and we will, as a contractor, either discount our price and we'll go administrate it and collect it ourselves, or we will go chase it down for the property owner, and the property owner will have that. So yeah.
So that can be part of your price?
Yes, sir. And it is
Hopefully every project.
almost always is, yeah.
It's all inclusive?
Yeah.
And you do all the research to see if any of the rebates are available as well?
Not necessarily the lenders. There's one company I can think of that's what they do. That's all that they do, and they're good at it. Most mechanical contractors are familiar with the programs in their geographic area that are available and applicable. Most lighting contractors are aware of theirs, and obviously it varies whether you're in Amarillo, in Excel, or Houston with CenterPoint or whatnot. But I'd start with the contractor, probably be the best source for that. So PACE is not intended to necessarily replace a first mortgage. It's probably going to be more expensive than a first mortgage in many cases. PACE lenders all have a different formula. It's probably 10 or 20 or blended T-bill rate margin. Then there's fees on top of that. Think of PACE really as a replacement for mezz or equity, and PACE is a bargain compared to mezzanine or equity. So kind of in a rate kind of between a first mortgage and mezz and equity is kind of where you're going to be. You guys can get more specific if you want.
No.
So that's the general way to think of it. And maybe as a parting thought, if the property owner can get a first mortgage, as much as we would all like to be involved in the deal, it's probably in their best interest to get a first mortgage to do, if it's available, do that. It's long-term fixed rate, probably non-recourse to the individual. Do that, it's probably lower. But so PACE isn't here to, put first mortgage companies out of business. That's not the role of PACE. It's to basically provide that capital to a property owner that would otherwise be funded either by equity, which is very, very expensive if you look at opportunity cost, or mezz, which is very pricey.
Yeah, and I'll put on my banker's hat, but it's apples to oranges. Because if you think about traditional first mortgage financing, you're going to have 5 or 7 year fixed rate mortgage, 10-year maturity, probably a balloon, and then it's probably a 20 to 30 year rate. This is fully fixed for 25 years. So you can't, because you're looking at net present value of kind of what your rate is. So it's kind of hard to compare those two. You may be able to borrow 75 or 80% of the first mortgage, but you do need to consider long-term orientation of the project. And if this is something you're going to hold for 20 years, I'm not necessarily a betting man, but I like the rates fixed for 25 years as opposed to 5 or 7 years with a 10-year maturity.
Yeah, and in fact, I was talking to a potential borrower today that was explaining their capital stack and said, really, I'd like to use PACE is there room for it, right? And so we'll look at it, and obviously we would love to maximize the amount of PACE that folks can get. It has a lot of benefits that it brings to them that they can't get in other forms of financing. But if it's already underwritten to a certain debt service coverage ratio, there may not be room for it. On the flip side, you know, we're starting to get calls from the senior lenders as well, right? Which is kind of a very interesting point in the market. There's been a lot of resistance in the past, and we're starting to see them really open up and see, okay, my borrowers are asking about this. I need to really understand what it is, and I need to get comfortable, because it can now be a competitive advantage to them if they will do this on projects, because we now have developers and owners that are saying, look, I have options. I know this bank has consented before on a PACE project. You know, I'd really like to do this. And so they're starting to take a really hard look at it. And maybe it helps them out, right? If they're displacing mezz and that's their borrower's option, or there's a gap in the capital stack and the project is gonna stall if the owner can't come up with $2 million more to put into it, then all day long they're gonna try to find a way to make the project happen, so.
Yeah, and everybody in the room has probably been in this situation where a building is about to go get, you know, a mortgage or new financing or refinancing. If you're considering PACE, just imagine the difference of, I own this building and I'm talking to a potential first mortgage holder. If I lock in that first mortgage and then tomorrow I call them back and say, oh, by the way, I'm interested in doing a PACE loan. I'd like you to subordinate your first mortgage on this project. You don't really have much leverage to get them to do that very easily. On the other hand, if you're talking to a first mortgage holder about possibly being the capital provider for your project, and oh, by the way, our intent is to do a X dollar PACE improvement in conjunction with this, so part of the package is going to be your upfront agreeing that that's going to be part of it, is just a little bit easier, right? So it's kind of like buying a new car and go, oh, you know, I really want the trailer package on, you know, it's like, negotiate it when you're negotiating the loan that would be part of the capital stack.
Okay, well, any final thoughts for everyone coming from the podium up here?
I'll say something just real quick. I said this before, but so apologize if you've heard it. But I've been in the commercial real estate business in Houston about 40 years, and PACE is the single biggest, best improvement I've seen in my commercial real estate career. It is a game changer for property owners, for contractors, for everybody in the business. And you know, it's still not widely known, and you kind of have to explain it sometimes multiple times to a person to kind of understand, and there's maybe a little bit of navigation of being able to do it, but it's not rocket science, it's not painful. It is a powerful, powerful tool, and I would encourage anybody that is property owner, contractor, you know, architects, engineers, it is a tool that can, you know, really change your business and be a great service to the end user, the property owner, and so it's a great deal. So,
in fact, there was a New York Times article that came out yesterday, day before, which was really exciting to see them feature commercial PACE and the impact that it can have in the environment where cities have different policies that they're implementing, and this being a financing source. So it's a really great article from a capital provider perspective, from a borrower's perspective, and then it also brought in kind of the ratings agencies and the institutional investor side of the project. So check that out if you guys see it, but it really is an interesting point in the market. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions. There are no dumb questions, right? This stuff, there's a lot of moving pieces, so any of us are happy to work with you guys to vet anything.
I'll say from a contractor's perspective, it would be immensely helpful to have as many case studies across as many different commercial property types available for our potentials to take a look at, because it is alien, foreign, sounds too good to be true, you know, you name it. There's a constant re-education piece, and that's before we even start talking about what we're supposed to be selling.
So to that point, there are some out in the front table for you to take away from you, and also Texas PACE Authority, as well as all of these folks up here, have case studies on their websites, which you are free to download and distribute.
and
To that point,
I said a minute ago, the first PACE project in Texas was a house of worship in Austin. They've been trying to get money to redo a couple of chillers in their synagogue for years, and they didn't really have the balance sheet to borrow money. PACE came along, and the lender kind of goes, loan money to the corner of 59 and Kirby. He was like, yeah, because they're highly secured by the real estate. So that was a great problem solution for a group that didn't really have access to capital. The second, third, and fourth deals in the state were done by the world's largest property owner who has almost unlimited access to capital. Why would they do PACE? It's a good deal, and it worked for them, and they are spending a lot of money around the country, upgrading their malls and stuff, and so it really has worked for the far left end of the spectrum and the far right end of the spectrum, and most of us are someplace in the middle of that, and so those are two examples. I think it's Simon. So,
Sean, do you want to close this out?
Yeah, I mean, I echo everything that they've said. Really, it is kind of the purest form of public-private partnership. I do think it's beneficial on all fronts because it is serving a public good. I'm not going to get all bleeding hard, but it's nice to be able to kind of lead the horse to water from an economic standpoint, where we are pushing public referendum of improving our communities, reducing carbon footprint, but also being able to do it in a way that's economical for property owners. So it's kind of a win for all parties. So happy to answer any other questions. Feel free to use this for a resource. I echo Rachel's comment that there's no such thing as stupid questions. It's what we're here for. So thanks for your time.
Great. Thank you, Sean, Tim, Rachel. Really appreciate you all being here and sharing your expertise. And Steve, thank you for the hospitality. I'll turn it back over to you.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. I don't know. I didn't go check. I think it stopped raining. So that'll be nice. Thank you, Marina. Thank you, panel. This was really a great event. Well attended. Next month is going to be about solar. So anybody interested in solar, come on back next month, and I'll be shooting out the emails on who, what, where, and when. Otherwise, thanks for coming, and that's our program for the evening. Yes.